This is Seventh Generation Warfare, and I am your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be looking at collectivism, individualism, social metaphysics as they relate to Seventh Generation Warfare. So, I am getting these concepts from the works of Ayn Rand. That's where I was first exposed to them in my mid-20s during a bit of a philosophical renaissance for myself, and when I really fought the majority of the battles in my sixth generation warfare. And she's pretty influential on the topic. Even if you haven't read her, you may have come across some of her beliefs, being reiterated by other people throughout society. So, what is collectivism? Collectivism holds that collectivism means that is the subjugation of the individual to the group. So basically, the individual is to serve the group, that the individual has no rights. The group has the rights. In a lot of people might think this is good, that we're here to serve each other, but in practice, it typically always resorts to a horror show. And Ayn Rand herself came from Soviet Russia and saw the atrocities that were occurred there. Most of statism in general is collectivist in nature, so any horror that can be attributed to a state or government typically is coming about from a collectivist mindset. But since collectivism is the subjugation of the individual to the group, that sounds very close to seventh generation warfare, in that in seventh generation warfare we are, in a sense, subjugating ourselves, our life, to the service of trying to secure the will of our descendants. But it's not, and that's the whole point of this video, is making that distinction clear so that you as seventh generation warfare fighters can avoid a trap here. So let me get back. What is individualism? Individualism regards man, every man or woman, as independent, sovereign entity who possesses inalienable rights of their own. And so with that comes self-ownership and extreme ownership, knowing that you are the agent controlling your life. No one is doing things to you per se, that your outcome in life is due to what you did with your life. You're not a victim. And that stands in contrast. Owning yourself stands in contrast with the last concept, which is a collectivist concept called social metaphysics. And social metaphysics basically just says that the truth is whatever the collective says it is. So a social metaphysician hasn't used their rational faculties to come to any beliefs of their own. They are merely regurgitating or parroting what the group around them wants them to say or believe. And ultimately, groups or collectives don't actually exist in reality. It's a concept. It's a fiction in our own head. So they're really just subjugating their will to a ghost. But a social metaphysician probably does it because they perceive it as being easier to go with the flow, or to blend in with the crowd, to not stick out, to act like a sheep, that there's some security in that, but it ultimately holds them back and is destructive to them. And so social metaphysics, believing what the group tells you to believe, is completely counter to sixth generation warfare. Sixth generation warfare is the fight to secure our own will. So in order to secure your own will, you have to be able to analyze what your values and beliefs are without the contamination of society coming in and influencing you. That's basically the whole thing, is figuring out who you are, what you want, and not having those other voices. It doesn't necessarily have to be from the collective. It could be natural impulses or instincts too, could be something that are actually counter to your will. But in one of the major enemies in a sixth generation warfare is the collective and what the collective wants you to do. And that collective could be, in fact, be your own family. It could also be larger collectives like your community or your country telling you what you should do or what makes you a good person. But a person who's fought a successful sixth generation warfare knows what makes me a good person is what I have rationally concluded makes me a good person. So they've become that individual. They've broken away and they've sensed the world for themselves and are able to stand on their own judgments. So with that, once you fight a successful sixth generation warfare and you become that individual, you can go any way you choose. You know, you can value anything you want to. You're no longer confined to what the group tells you should be. You are free to navigate your life as you choose. Very freeing. That's where also the virtue of selfishness sort of thing comes through. And many people then choose to live a life of enjoyment to themselves. And that's fine. I'm not going to tell you you can't live an enjoying life. I have more in common with a hedonic individualist, a person who is an individual who pursues their own personal pleasure in life. I have more in common with that person than I do somebody who's stuck in the group hive mind and can't break free and can't think for themselves, who is in fact a slave to the thoughts and whims of others. I have more in common with the individual in that case, even if the hive-minded person, the collectivist person, was all about family values, I'd still have more in common with the individualist who's a hedonist. Why? Because they've come to it on their own. They know the value of themselves. So with seventh generation warfare, it's because you are free to choose your path in life, and then you are choosing to go back and serve your family. So there's a quote that I came across recently that is, "Nothing in nature lives for itself. Rivers don't drink their own water. Trees don't eat their own fruit. The sun doesn't shine for itself. A flower's fragrance is not for itself. Living for each other is the rule of nature." So I think I agree with that, and I think when you become an individual and are free to choose that as your own, you're not pressured into it. I think it's a good calling to go back to that, go back to being in service of others, not take your individuality and turn to selfishness, just turn to living the life that makes you happy. Try to live a life that brings happiness to others, but you're doing it because you want to do it, not because you are compelled to by the group. So I recently had a Facebook post where I asked, is it okay to laugh at people on a self-destructive trajectory? And a lot of responses, but you could see, one of the answers I liked the most was that if it's your honest expression, don't limit your honest expression. If you're finding humor in it, then it's okay to laugh. And that is a perspective of somebody who has individual mentality. Because in order to self-censor, in order to not be able to laugh, then you are failing yourself in your sixth generation warfare. Now, on the opposite side, there were many people who said, no, you shouldn't laugh at that. And those type of people fell into two groups. There was the people who said, no, you shouldn't laugh because I have been programmed to say you shouldn't laugh. And there was those who said, no, you shouldn't laugh because it's probably not a good behavior for you to engage in. Like, you're probably degrading yourself if you find humor in the suffering of others. And so that could very much be an individualistic mentality of that. You don't want to laugh at people who are suffering because it's not because the harm it could potentially do to them, but because the harm it could potentially do to you. So back to seventh generation warfare, we are ultimately fighting a seventh generation warfare. We are trying to secure the will of our children because we want to, not because we feel compelled to, not because society or a collective of any sort is telling us that we should just live in service of our children. It's because we want to live in service of our children. So I hope that in this episode I've made a clear distinction of the two. You have to secure your own will and be a willful participant in seventh generation warfare. And all around us is collectives, the idea of collectives telling us how we should act. And until you are ready to tell the collective to F off and that you will determine what is right for your own life, you haven't quite fully grasped the concept yet. So please like, subscribe, and share. I hope you found this one valuable, and I'll see you on the next one.